MRO, Unleashing the Sector. Here in the panel, may we please have Air Marshal B.K. Pandey, Mr. Bharat Malkani, and Mr. Pulak to come on stage, please. Thank you. Request Air Marshal B.K. Pandey to be the moderator for today's session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are running a little short of time, but I think this panel being a smaller one, we should be able to catch up on the time. In the past couple of hours, a lot has been said about the civil aviation industry in India. And one thing that stands out very clearly is the agony that the civil aviation industry is going through. In fact, across the board, all aspects of the aviation industry is struggling for one reason or another. But I find that the challenges that the BAOA is grappling with are probably as serious or as severe as those facing the industry. But what was most heartening to note today is the positive vibes that came from the Ministry of Civil Aviation through the representative, the Joint Secretary, Mr. Ashok Kumar. This session that we are going to now conduct pertains to a stepchild of the industry, and that is the MRO industry. It is a segment which is somewhat neglected, not fully understood. The import of the segment is not understood at all. To begin with, the industry itself is, to use military parlance, a force multiplier for the economy of the nation. Similarly, the MRO industry plays a similar role as far as the civil aviation industry is concerned. Now, as some speakers brought out, so some very fancy projections have been made ever since Mr. Praful Patel was the Minister of Civil Aviation about the rate of growth of the civil aviation industry. In fact, it is said that in this region, the Indian civil aviation industry is the fastest growing. You can imagine how slow the others must be. Anyway, having said that, undoubtedly there is a huge potential. And as the industry, civil aviation industry grows, so does the MRO, because it follows in its wake. But unfortunately, who is benefiting? Our neighbors are benefiting. You know, the region, the MRO hubs in the region are benefiting, and not us. As was brought out, 90% of the business goes there. So it's imperative that we do something about it. Today, this MRO segment is over-regulated, most misunderstood, there is total lack of understanding. But this is not the only one which is not understood. As some of our earlier speakers brought out, that there is even the lack of understanding of regulations. The tax structure is very unfriendly. The procedures for import of components extremely complicated. Duty has to be paid on import of a component, import duty that is, and then when the component is sold to the aircraft operator, once again sales tax has to be paid. So it's a double taxation. The volume of business is very low, and of course there are infrastructural problems. Now, India has a strategic location in this region, and it could well become a very prosperous and a flourishing hub. But unfortunately, the situation has not been exploited to our advantage. The government definitely has a role. There is no doubt about it, because without the government's driving this whole industry, little can be achieved. I would like to focus on one more aspect of this whole MRO business, and that is civil-military cooperation. Now, the military operates around 1,600 odd aircraft in this country, maybe more. If you take all the three wings, it may be closer to 2,000 plus. They also need MRO, just like your civilian fleet, but their MROs are not in-house. They are captive. We have an organization which is basically civil in nature, that is the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, but they are meant to provide MRO services to the military. But wherever there has been commonality of aircraft, HAL has been providing MRO services. For example, when the Indian Airlines was operating Avro aircraft, the Avro was manufactured by them and it was looked after by them also. So, in principle, there is no problem of synergy between the two. But yet, today the situation is that there is practically no synergy between the military MRO and the civil MRO. Now, the military MRO basically is provided by HAL, as I said, as well as many as 8 base repair depots with the Indian Air Force. Now, these are spread all over the country, essentially in the north, south and west. There are none in the east. Now, where lies the problem? Why is it that there cannot be a synergy between the civil and the military? You'll appreciate that these two agencies, the military and the civil, are controlled by 2 different ministries. Now, even in a single ministry, say the Ministry of Civil Aviation, there are difficulties in coordinating between different departments of the ministry. You can imagine how more complicated this could be if 2 different ministries are involved. And that's exactly what happened. There are turf wars, there is the protection of individual interests. So finally, who suffers? The Indian civil aviation industry. Because as far as the military is concerned, they are quite happy with their MRO services, and they are not looking for anything. But things have changed a little bit. Today, the Indian Air Force particularly is wanting to, is looking for support of the MRO industry from the civil, because HAL is overloaded and they can't cope with any more work. In fact, for the Su-30 fleet, they are not able to provide the kind of support that the Air Force needs. So the Air Force is thinking about exploring options. But there are some problems in achieving synergy between the military and the civil. Now, what are these impediments? First of all, there is lack of commonality of the fleets. As you know, the military aircraft, they are especially role specific. They are not used for civil purposes. Generally, even the transport aircraft are slightly different or radically different. The military MRO, or rather the civil MRO, is not geared up or is not structured to meet the requirements of the military, which means there are a lot more investments will be required in the civil MRO to be able to take on tasks for the military. The other thing is that the military aircraft have some specialized and very sensitive equipment on board. The civil MRO has to cope with that. Then, of course, there are the security concerns. The military is very conscious of this and very sensitive to this. Somehow they feel that anything and everything is, to be seen from the point of view of national security. I'm not saying justified, but that is the mindset. And to my mind, we are weighed down by some antiquated mindsets. So that has to be changed before any synergy can be, real synergy can be achieved. But all is not lost, because things are changing. In 2012, for the first time, the Air Force initiated a proposal to involve the civil MRO into providing services for military aircraft. And in the middle of 2014, actually a tender was floated for the civil MRO to come forward and offer MRO services for two types of aircraft. I think it was one of the fighter aircraft, MiG-29, and the other was the AN-32. I am not sure, the bids were supposed to be submitted by the end of 2014. I expect that they would have been done, and probably the matter progressed. We will hear of it maybe soon. There is nothing strange about this proposal, because even in our neighborhood it is happening. In a country like Sri Lanka, there is a company called FL Technics, which is a Lithuanian company, which provides MRO services for their AN-32 fleet as well as the American C-130 fleet. So if Sri Lankan can do it, why not India? Obviously, the air forces, being keen, are moving forward at least for the transport fleet. It may not be that simple to get the MRO from the civil involved in the fighter fleet, but definitely for the rotary wing and for the transport aircraft, it would be easier. And they're moving in that direction. Wherever there is likely to be commonality of aircraft, for example, now we are planning, or the Air Force is planning to get the Airbus A330 as a flight refueling aircraft. Now there will be some commonality between the Airbus fleet in the military and the Airbus fleet in the civil. So it will be possible to develop some synergy there. Dornier aircraft is another example. Embraer, the Air Force is operating Embraer, and there are Embraers operating the civil. So if you can get over these mindsets, it's possible to achieve a level of synergy that has not been there before. But the best news so far is that the new defense procurement procedure has some 30 to 50% has to be invested back into India, and there is a provision to set up MRO facilities in the civil for this purpose, to support the aircraft which the Air Force buys. So maybe wherever the Rafale deal is finalized, we may see a very, very significant change in this arena. Now, having said that, I would request our first speaker, Mr. Bharat Malkani. He is the MD of Max Aerospace, to kindly deliver his talk.
A very good afternoon to you all. I have the honor of speaking to a very informed audience and a very sharp audience. So I'm not going to come up with any presentations. I'm going to try and keep it extempo. You'll have to pardon my lack of information because I came only halfway through the summit. I was involved in a USIBC program below. And the one thing I can say is there are a lot more people here than the USIBC. So obviously there is more enthusiasm in the business aviation space than military. Having said that, a brief introduction about our company. We have three verticals. Max Aerospace does military MRO. We have a joint venture with Air France called Max MRO that does components for civil aircraft. And as on 29th of Jan this year, we have entered into a JV with SNECMA to do support for military and civil engines, which means that I know precious little about business MRO or the business aviation. So I will do my best to do justice on what I see the view forward. In deference to just about everyone else who has spoken, I beg to differ. I think the opportunity in this country for MRO is huge. If, and I understand that somebody mentioned 90%, I'm assuming Mr. Ashok Kumar would have come up with some numbers like that. No, you didn't. So The number given to us, which I think is pretty close to the truth, is that 90% of the Indian MRO is done out of India. So the term MRO is redefined as maintenance and repair overseas. Under the circumstances, that 90% does not necessarily present a crisis but an opportunity. And I do accept, being part of the MRO space now 21 years, that there are certain challenges. But I would also like to identify some of the biggest challenges that have been surmounted. And while it's very easy for us to sit here and bash the Indian government and the DGCA and the Ministry of Civil Aviation, let's also give a hand for what they've achieved, because they have. And it wouldn't have happened without the dedication of a minority of officers, but I think that's the vocal minority, and they've mattered. If you see the MRO space for business aviation, and I'm going to try and limit it to business aviation, I'm not going to get, sir, into military space or civil space at this point. You've traditionally had a very few companies operating here. Even today, I believe they have not even reached a tenth of their potential. I do accept that there are policy issues that need to be surmounted. But they have found different ways to succeed, whether it was going out of airport authority airfields, working outside the system. Not that it makes for a very pleasant way to work, because as a young company, as a small company, it is a struggle. But as a major investor, that you come down from various parts of the world, this also makes for a very compelling business case. Business aircraft are not the easiest to transport across the ocean. In any event, we can't fly them across Pakistan and China. So there is a real opportunity to do it right here in India. The skills, the manpower, and the infrastructure is now almost there. The skills have always been there. We as a company have a unwritten policy where we lose 10% to 15% of our guys to Qatar Airways and Emirates and all that every year. So the skills exist, and these skills in India are re-importable from the Middle East. We've had a lot of people who wanted to come back over the years. And I think it again makes for a very good case that, do you have the skill? Pulak, can you just shut that off? Give me a second. It's a modern leprosy. So, while you have a loss of manpower, ergo, loss of capability, ergo, leading down to loss of MRO, it boils down to a simple thing. Can we do MRO in India? Absolutely yes. You've had the classic examples given of HAL from the military sector, and I would say Air India, who actually delivered MRO. Perhaps when they were created, perhaps the times when they were needed as a nation, it made sense. We moved on. The 20th century is over and done with. In the 21st century, it's industry that's going to have to take the lead. A small organization like ours started in a garage. We compare ourselves to the Apple of the MRO industry 20 years ago, with a one-man team. And it has happened for most of us to see and believe what is the change here. So if I was to identify the main issues which I would like my ministry to take back, I'm not going to talk about taxes because, let's accept it, customs duty for all practical purposes has gone to zero. I do accept that for the private aircraft there is an issue, and I'm sure we'll surmount that too. But from a high of almost 40 to 60%, we're down to zero. And let me tell all those of you who may not know it, and who are here from the state of Karnataka and from the rest of the world, Maharashtra state has taken VAT to 0%. Sales tax on MRO specifically is at zero. So there is no carry forward expenses that you're going to be giving your customer. The service tax component is set off by up to 70% with a smart operator. Now, if the operator ceases to be smart about his business, or he wants to play dumb, I can't change that, neither can you. If 70% of the service tax you collect can be set off, by what you're charging your customer, the 30% of the 12% on the labor really boils down to a pretty small percentage. In the business aviation side, even a smaller amount. The killer really, and so this is what I've always said, is airport royalties. It is unconstitutional, unacceptable, and we expect no apology for it. It has to go. There is no sense in charging a royalty on the MRO, and for those who don't know how it works, is that if you have an MRO at any government airfield, between, depending on the taxation structure, 13%, now I understand Delhi wants to go to more than 20%, of the gross turnover that you make has to be paid to the airport's authority as a royalty. No one's going to pay it. So you're going to get all kinds of people who want to subvert the system or not do the MRO. Effectively, since the people of this nation are maturing, and you've seen an example in Delhi, subversion is not the option anymore. The simple idea is send it to, like you said, Sri Lanka or Singapore or what you may. To give an analogy, if you were to rent an office space while at the air show from the Taj Hotel, this very property, all the deals that you did here would attract a 20% royalty from the Taj Group to be able to conduct your business from here after paying them their rental charges. I don't believe this exists in any part of the world. And it ought to go. And to the lobby of the business aviation and the lobby of MRO Association, it must be now a single point agenda, and with the Civil Aviation Ministry. Because if you see the scope of these 300 odd aircraft that we have and the ability to deliver, but us not delivering because of one major hurdle called the airport royalty, it's a shame and it's a black mark on the democracy of this country. We have to move forward. Apart from that, one royalty issue, I really don't see trouble. And you've got new airports coming up. We ourselves have gone to a place called Nagpur. It's developed by the Maharashtra government. They came with a stated policy, no royalty. And I'm sure there will be so many more airports that come out there. I don't see a single true integrated MRO in India that can take a general aviation plane apart, systems. And the only reason for that might have been the historical baggage that we've carried of taxes and policies. But if you were to go and establish one out of the metro airports, I think that opportunity exists now. I see a lot of people I know here from various large organizations. It's only a matter of time before the Indian companies will scale up to be able to do this work. So if anyone is looking for entry, you're still at a low price line today. 5 years from now, even though we may crib and cry in such forums, we will have still progressed another 20–30%. The cost of equity you'll buy into will be 3 times or 4 times the price. The chance exists now to do it. In terms of policy, we believe the time is now and the timing is critical. And it's really a one-point agenda, sir. Royalties have to go. MROs, historically, just for your knowledge, were clubbed with ground support operations. So the guys who came and brought your step ladder, who took the bags out of the plane, those who cleaned the aircraft. And because the revenues were small and they were using the infrastructure of the airport authority, I think it made sense. The airport authority said, listen, 10% of what you own, give it to us. That's the only way we can make it work. So it was kind of a socially acceptable format. But when you take a hangar from the airport and you've paid for it and you pay for everything, then we see no reason why royalty should be charged. The other thing I believe we need in our country is for some smart operator to really set up the first FBO. I don't think we have an FBO. And an FBO, if combined with an MRO, makes for a fantastic business sense. I do accept the logic that the major metros that hold probably 90% of the fleet, and I'm saying Mumbai and Delhi, it's quite a challenge to get a space over there. But I don't think it's now mandatory that you have to go to Bombay and Delhi. You have options in the country. Marshal spoke a bit about civil and military cooperation. I think it's still a way off. I think for business aviation to adapt to a military aircraft, sir, with due respect to you, is still complicated. But having said that, a pure MRO has a lot of commonality between civil and military aircraft. There are regulatory hurdles. There are huge challenges. But unless we don't take our domestic requirement, that is first business aviation, what we are all here for today, then graduating to do a work for a Mirage or a Sukhoi or what you may, is perhaps unacceptable business sense. At least let's get my Cessnas or my Beechcrafts or the Bells, or whatever you might have out there, Gulfstreams, Embraers. Let us get that up and running in a manner that is befitting as a business case. Finally, just as a understanding, sir, military offsets cannot be transferred to civil as on today. They don't allow it. Matter of fact, the civil offsets for Air India, when they purchased the 787 and the 777, and I think also 320s, was split into two parts. 50% went to STC, that is the State Trading Corporation, therefore galvanizing sale of Indian mangoes in America, because that was the deal. I'm pretty sure that if there were no offsets, Americans would never eat Indian mangoes. And the other half went to Air India. And that's the other mindset we really need to get out of. Air India and the PSUs are our partners, not our confrontationist companies. Having said that, they are not the be-all and end-all of Indian aviation. Indian aviation has grown a substantial amount in the last 60 years. Today you've got every color conceivable in the sky flying in the civil aviation sector. A lot to do with Go, because Go paints each of its planes in different colors. But you've got a very vibrant industry. And if you assume that 1/5 of the revenues of an operating an aircraft effectively go to do maintenance, then we're looking at a substantially large number. And I don't have this number with me right now. What is the revenue that the business aviation has? And so by revenue, I mean revenue in a non-election year. Because the revenues in an election year are absolutely off the target. But it's a pretty good revenue. And I think it's a matter of time before some of the smaller MROs will ramp up and some of the bigger MROs will consolidate. So on that note, I will close my little address here. I thank you all for being patient. Thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon. Till they put on my presentation, I formed this association in 2011. I am associated with this show called MRO India, which we started in, I'll come to the association part. Thank you for giving me the opportunity of addressing here. And MRO finds, turn around? Okay. I'm a little text idiot, I must say. We'd like to see the market outlook here. You know, the Asia-Pacific region is expected to emerge as the largest aviation market by 2032. That's not my prediction. That's a prediction by KPMG, who has done a lot of survey, and I presume their figures are right. Indian civil aviation industry today is amongst the top 10 globally, with a size of 16 billion US dollars. All of you know that. And the Indian carriers by 2020 are going to have 1,200 aircraft. I am speaking at the Business Operators Association, but I have very limited data on business operators' fleet and the MRO capabilities, so please pardon me for that. Boeing says, and Airbus also says around the same figure, 1,200 aircraft by 2020, and total manpower requirement by the airline industry is 62,000 in the financial year 2011, which will grow to 1,17,000 by financial year 2017. And this is only for the airline industry. We are not talking about the MRO industry here. And the current size of MRO industry is minuscule at 700 to 800 million per year now. What is the reason? This is the current aircraft fleet. There are around 399, close to 400 aircraft. On order 477, and on option 100. There are no option or on order by the new carriers. Options by the new carrier like AirAsia India and Vistara. We expect them to take much more aircraft in the coming years. These are the tails of the 8 airlines which we have. The market is going back, okay. This is the MRO market outlook, and India's scheduled airline fleet, as I said, was 399 and 1,200 aircraft by 2023. This is what I would like you to see. The MRO segment, and I mean, you all know the division in the MRO segment over there. But if you see the Asia Pacific, the regional thing is 27, and 27% of the global global market. But India doesn't stand anywhere in that, primarily because we have fiscal problems, and they are actually bogging down millions and millions worth of equipment, manpower invested by companies like Bharat and Air India and other things. This is the market share of an aircraft MRO. 40% of MRO spend is by the airline goes for engine. More than 500 Airbus A320 Neos have been ordered by Indian operators. That is between Indigo and Vistara and what do you call Air Costa, and this will have, there's a business case for opening an engine MRO and in India, but how will somebody invest so much money in an engine MRO? You know, Air India has gone with GE and opened an engine cell in Nagpur, which has costed them 90 million. So that kind of investment has to go. Similarly, the MRO for landing gears, we don't have any. Components, he is doing quite a bit of components, Bharat. And nacelles and These all require money. What we have in abundance today, we have in the state of Karnataka, there are 5 lakh engineering students coming out every year. I am not saying that everybody has got aeronautical engineering background, but Bharat, you're an engineer. You would estimate how much of that 5 lakh would be used for aeronautical industry?
I think we're running short. We need 1 million.
So, if it comes out 5 lakhs in Karnataka, I am sure it will be multiples of that. We have English-speaking people, very, very deft in their hands if you have technicians. And the USP of this industry is found in abundance and availability of skilled manpower with English speaking, as I was saying. And we have estimated for a spend of $1 million MRO service in India, it will create job for at least 30 to 40 new jobs in India, direct, and maybe around same number indirect, because there has to be an ecosystem. I don't see there is a good ecosystem for MRO in India today. That has to be built up. The 2 major trends, in my opinion, in the MRO business today is adoption of a new business model by legacy airlines. Why I am saying so is now Airbus has put a clause on some of the carriers that when you buy NEOs, A320 NEOs, you have to tie up with us for the AMC, annual maintenance contract. Not that they will do themselves, they are identifying some MROs in India to work on their behalf. But the MROs, the bigger MROs should, in my opinion, not only develop their facility, they should also help the smaller MROs, not a bigger component MRO like you, Bharat, but smaller ones in interior and other things, should work with, say, GMR, Air India, and Airworks, so that everybody gets a share of the job, because individually nobody will gain from it. And it becomes, administratively perhaps it becomes easier for the airline also. The other trend that I was saying was MROs and OEMs are taking an integrated role to provide after-sales service. That is what the new thing is. These changes can be attributed to increase in OEM involvement and changing technologies. As I was saying in the beginning, MRO Association of India was formed on 8 June 2011 in a facility provided by Bharat. He was a very good host in his hotel in Bombay, to basically provide a level playing field for the existing and the intending companies wanting to come into MRO. The changes so far has been exemption of custom duties on aircraft tires, spare parts, test equipment, which came in 2012, soon one year after the thing. Then the association has always worked with the, we are a lobby and a friend group to you, sir. We have been working together with the Ministry of Civil Aviation. Like he said, there are a handful of officers who listen to us and put our cases through. And we have formulated a draft MRO policy. Hopefully we'll see it in the next budget. What we have been able to do is increase the storage period of spare parts from 6 months to 1 year. But we want that period to be infinite. The government of Maharashtra, as Bharat said, has, I missed out the sales tax part there. Same thing, VAT, the same thing. And this was instrumental in, because we have been working with each and every government, the state government we can talk to, and we got that exemption, and this is the order that was issued on VAT exemption on MRO. The Prime Minister of India, Mr. Modi, has a very big vision of Make in India, and we are very happy because the Civil Aviation Ministry is very proactive. MRO has found a place in his vision. The short-term initiatives that are undertaken in the next 1 year under the Make in India drive consist of this: incentivizing Indian MROs to make them globally competitive by doing what? By providing exemption on sales tax of 12.36%, payment of gross tax and royalties to airport. That is what Bharat was saying. That will be removed. Providing infrastructure to retain MRO within India. That is another big thing that needs, it's a very welcome gesture by the government. Development of sound MRO base is also linked to developing the aeronautical industry, manufacturing industry. This is the Make in India program of, we have a wish list like everybody has. And what is our wish list? Our wish list to the ministry is like the IT industry, and IT was not so known, and in those days in late 90s when Devang, what was his name, Mehta? Devang Mehta, NASCOM. Today we are very IT savvy. So he actually formulated something, and today the IT industry is what it is. So we want the government to provide us a 10-year tax holiday covering all taxes and duties, custom duty, excise, service tax and the corporate tax on aeronautical and defense manufacturing, MRO and import of aircraft, civil aircraft that is. Encourage states to extend the tax holiday, coordinate with the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, because Ministry of Civil Aviation themselves cannot do it, to modify the Serve from India scheme such that the export MRO services can be treated at par at export in Make in India product. The 1-year exemption I mentioned about import duty on aircraft parts for MRO should be extended in perpetuity. Airport royalty on MRO should be reduced, or I would say abolished. Customs regulation should be made straightforward and simple. What has happened is the exemption that the government has given on spare parts and aircraft tires and test equipment are not interpreted evenly by all custom officers. They somehow find some ambiguity in it, and then the MROs face problems. The next one is aircraft parts, consumables, expandables must be allowed to be imported without hassle because of that. Engine, APU landing gear, consumable, expendable, etc. are not considered as aircraft part by the custom authority. What we have urged to the DGCA, and sir you know about it, that we have given a document as a advisory to the custom authority so that they follow the AP, what do you call it, the manuals, IPC and other things, CMM, all, and make the one person in an MRO company custom man or custom authorized signatory, and hold him responsible if there is something hanky-panky going on. The biggest hindrance in my understanding, those are hindrances that can be tackled one by another. The biggest hindrance today is the lessors prefer to give their aircraft to other MROs in the neighboring countries like Sri Lanka, Singapore, Malaysia for final checks. And why the leasing companies and financing banks are apprehensive to complete that 8-year heavy maintenance check in India for redelivery checks. The tax imposed depending upon state to state is which the transfer occurs is between 4% and 16% on the value of the aircraft, which adds to an increased cost to be paid by either the lessor or the future airline to deregister and get it into N registration. This is a big hazard, and that is why, in my opinion, the aircraft are going abroad. Though all the MROs in India today have DGCA, FAA and EASA certification with not world class, but you can do redelivery checks here, whether it is JMR or Air India or Airworks India, who even have painting facilities. And this is actually being the deterrent to the thing, which in my opinion should be addressed at the what should I say, just now or very near future. I remember a case when Kingfisher had gone bust, and we have a regular meeting with GIFAS, the French industry group, and we were meeting in this Bangalore Air Show at that time, and represented is some of my friends over here are here, who were there in the meeting are here. They, especially from ATR and Airbus, they came to us and told us that though India is a signatory to the Cape Town Convention, but they were not adhering to it and holding on to the aircraft. MRO Association represented for the aircraft OEMs, and we could sort out that problem. So I think the government has to look into all that, in my opinion. In conclusion, I would like to say I want to share a very important information with all of you from this platform. Can any of you imagine how much money the country is losing in terms of foreign exchange per day on account of MRO work going abroad? Any guess? No? Every day, in fact, as we speak just now, 120 crore of rupees is being transferred to an overseas MRO by an Indian airline. And that is not only today, it will happen every day. It's an everyday affair. Ladies and gentlemen, MRO is an integral to the growth of aviation sector in India. It produces employment, revenue, government taxes. Above all, self-sufficiency in aircraft maintenance capabilities. We have the potential to grow into an MRO hub in this region for our strategic location. If Singapore can or Sri Lanka can, why can't we do that? All that is needed is the continued intervention on the part of the government of India to create a congenial environment in this country, to withhold the outgoing business and arrest the flow of valuable foreign exchange, and employment to be generated to young technical and engineering graduates. Else the advantages will continue to accrue to India's competitors. It is high time that the government of India stands up and addresses this tremendous loss of foreign exchange to the national exchequer and give the impetus to creating a skill development training to MRO workforce and give some fiscal benefits to strengthen the base of Indian MRO industry. Thank you. I would like to show you another thing. Sorry, I forgot. We are going to have an MRO show in Bangalore, which we will call India MRO, Aerospace and Defense. And this will be held in Bangalore on December 1st to 2nd. First it was decided 1 to 3, but we have restricted to 2 days. And I would love you all to come and participate at this show and make this a success, because MRO would be the next destination. India would be the next destination for MRO. That is my conviction. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Yes, 5 minutes. Any questions, please? Yes, ma'am.
Well, my question is to Mr. Sain. Actually, I would beg in this world, stand at the aircraft and do the maintenance, repair and overhaul. So it's generally done by technicians which are at a lower level, and they are certified world over. They are certified. There are certain courses which are done for all sort of aviation technicians. And what are we doing in India to develop this skilled manpower? We don't need engineers. What are we doing in India to develop this skilled manpower for MROs?
I stand corrected. The 5 lakh figure that I gave in Karnataka were diploma engineers who can be adopted into aviation. Software is one part, computing is another part, IT technology is there, which are all required in aviation.
So, but what is the MRO industry and the associate?
Admittedly, it's inadequate and we need more schools. I understand that we will come with the policy through the Indian government of trying to encourage such schools in the country.
But do you also certify them? Is there a certification body which is certifying such skill?
No, ma'am. You cannot, as an MRO, we can give them on-the-job training. They will then go for their various exams, whether it's called the B1, B2, A1, A2, as EASA calls it, or what we call ANC or EIR, and they have to pass the exams. For type certification, they have to go to the aircraft manufacturer or a school that can impart type certification. But the MRO gives them the minimum OJT skills in order to qualify for that exam or certification.
Repaired and maintained by an Indian MRO. It has been successfully completed this month itself. So a beginning has been made now by an Indian civil MRO working on an embedded aircraft of the VVIP squadron.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Ashok Kumar, please. So we're at, I think, the 6th or 7th edition of the Bangalore Air Show.
Yes.
I hope we get this royalty out before the next one.
No. I'm very happy because I've been hearing the brilliant speaker Bharat is. 3 years back, I had been associated for the last 3-4 years back. 3 years back, I heard Bharat telling, excise duty is the killer. Excise duty was gone. Then he said, VAT is the killer. VAT is gone. Today he has finally come out with royalty is the killer. Probably royalty also will go. So hopefully, and I am happy that a lot of issues have been addressed, and most of these points which he have raised has been addressed by the ministry where it's possible by the ministry. Certain things which are beyond the ministry, like the with the finance ministry is very difficult to handle. So probably we hope that this time sense would prevail, and the Make in India campaign would really make the difference. As Mr. Sen said in the Secretary's presentation to the Prime Minister, because Prime Minister had asked the sector-wise presentation from the concerned secretaries, and we had devoted a lot of time for and importance for the MRO industry. So this time probably a lot of change would happen, and the Air India MRO in Nagpur, which is coming up, which is a very advanced stage, about 100 crore investment is there, and that is going to be a very, very high-end MRO with engine facilities and all. And there are also the Airbus also is in talks with various MROs operating in the country to look at establishing their MRO facility in India. So there is a bright future for the MRO industry in the country, and I don't know next year what will Bharat say, which is the killer.
Sir, to answer, I had to respond, and thank you so much for supporting. When we did not exist and we had existential problems, the minimum we required was customs duty to go. The moment the customs duty went and we were beginning to exist and we grew, we realized that VAT was an unsustainable amount. Now, thanks to the blessings of your ministry, we've reached here. So now we're in a position to say, can we have the whole aircraft? By the way, can you get rid of royalty? So the customs issue is a separate issue, but we'll take. Yes, I have someone in the back there. Please. I see a hand, but I can't recognize the face. Oh. Mr. Dubey.
Bharat, hi.
Dubey, you can't be way out there. I mean, tall kids get thrown in the back because they throw chalks.
Okay, I have a very simple question, Bharat. Very simple question. Every state chief minister is talking about setting up an MRO in his flagship airport. In your expert opinion, how many MROs can India sustain? Thank you.
Amber, it's a very smart question to put me on the dock. But nonetheless, if I was to not name states, essentially you can't do MRO in more than 2-3 states. You will not get the trained manpower. If I was to use a very safe option, I would say, let's take the northeastern part of India. I mean, of course, you get very good people, but can you sustain an MRO? Absolutely not. You have challenges. So I don't estimate more than 2 to 3 states really being able to develop true MROs. And these are very obvious because these exist already. Maybe a 4th state who is interested in really coming up with a radically positive policy could change the game. But if we actually end up doing 4, 5, 6 MROs, 7 MROs state, I don't think we will have an oversupply because the world already has an oversupply. We are looking to target the Indian market. What you will have is companies that come and go rapidly. And you'll create a pool of manpower at a lower cost for the guys who survive.
No, but just a corollary, doesn't it make sense to just have two MROs in the country, because you need the consolidation of everything which goes into an aircraft. There's some 80,000 parts and the serviceability. Isn't it better to have it at just 2 locations rather than having 4 or 5? That's
I am against the concept of cluster or aero park. It hasn't really succeeded in anywhere else. Matter of fact, just to relate at the US IBC, the whole concept of aero parks was discussed, and apparently 20 aero parks have been planned over the last 4 years and 0 have fructified. Now, 2 may be a wish list for some, But really, to someone who wants to start up, let's say, for example, somebody in Madhya Pradesh really wants, and I know MP is pushing very hard for an MRO, and the person has all the competency, I would still say to that person, how are you going to get trained manpower? Because you're looking at people who are pretty much at the higher end of the spectrum of technicians. And then you have to have a good planning team and so on and so forth. So 2 would make great sense, but I think India, given its size and diversity, would need 3. But this is an individual number. It does not necessarily carry all the data background to support it. Okay? Well, thank you, Rohit. Thank you, everybody. Marshal.
Bharat, this question is to you. We deal with both Aeroworks and Indamar, which are the largest MROs in Mumbai. And of course, for business aviation, I would have of course loved to see one of them there on the dais. That not being the case, one question which comes to the mind is the number of types of aircraft that an MRO is handling. Because we at one point of time were looking at starting a 145 organization in Mumbai. And one of the things which was an impediment was the fixed costs are very high. Because all that you have is basically manpower. And irrespective of whether you have aircraft are also actually not allowing us to consolidate, number one. And many of the engineers are of course going to Gulf, that being the case which you mentioned. We have found that there is lack of expertise for handling the higher level of checks. And for that, you rightly said MRO is maintenance and repair overseas, because the overseas guys like in Dubai and in Singapore would go to such extent that they will even give discounts on the fuel charges that you burn when you're going from India to that and come back. And they have those same manpower which were actually working with Airworks and Indamar who are going to do the work there. So what I'm asking is the lack of consolidation of types causing an issue for the MRO to consolidate its resources?
Not at all. You have the same number of types globally. And not to sound boring or repetitive, because we never developed the industry. And yes, I think here, I blame us, Indians, not just the policymakers, they're part of us. We never recognized this. It was easy to go. What Airworks and Indamar did for a long time was very basic level of maintenance. Now they have really, changed the game and gone much forward. So the amount of people they've been able to train has been limited. And really, insofar as your company, I don't remember which company you're from, Reliance. So the only thing you're going to have to do is really go out there and invest the money on the people. And you're going to invest on infra. Each one of us, it's a chicken and egg story. If you don't build, no one's coming. So I wrote something in this paper, and I'll take 2 more minutes of your time. And this is really a message out to all the Indians out here. I'm assuming everyone who's come from abroad is now an established organization. Even today, to do MRO, if you don't have a fire burning in your gut that tells you this is what you want to do out of your life, don't do it. Walk away with your money. Walk away now. Because unless you don't have that fire burning and you know that you're going to dedicate 25 hours out of 24 in a day in trying to sort it out, you will never get there. And if that dedication and leadership doesn't exist, don't bother with it. This is not a bean counter and this is not a cookie cutter game. You are going to have to innovate every day. Because we don't have the policies in place, accept it. Does it mean you'll stop? Yes. But does it mean you will stop an absolutely idiotic maverick, people like us? No, you won't stop us. We'll still do it. And unless you have that leadership in whichever organization, be it Reliance, be it SR, I'm talking about the big boys. If you don't have that leadership to drive you, no amount of money you spend is going to deliver a result. Till this country comes on an even keel, and therefore I use that old Chinese proverb, crisis equals opportunity.
Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much, audience.